Hey, what's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This is JB right here, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. I just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew. I'm talking about Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine. And for everyone who is watching this video, I hope that you will support Behind the Bench and become a subscriber and help make this podcast the best that it can possibly be. Now, check this out. Let's go back in time. Let's reverse the clock to the year 2020. And something unforeseen impacted society in the worst way, where we was confronted with a global pandemic, where a virus would change our life and change the course of our life and how we conducted our life for the next 3 years. I'm talking about the COVID virus. And I'm glad that now in the year 2023, we are beginning to move beyond the threat of COVID in the grand scheme of things. And the virus is not posing the threat that it once did when it began to spread like wildfire. But something happened in the NBA during the time where that COVID hit. And initially, remember, the 2019-2020 NBA campaign was suspended approximately 70 to 71 games in, around the middle of March, where the league stopped play, which they did the right thing because we didn't know how dangerous that virus was. And other sports leagues, including the NCAA, they canceled the men's and women's Final Four tournament. Now with baseball, football season had just ended. Baseball had not started yet. So the two sports leagues that were posed with this threat during the progression of the season was the NBA and the NHL. Now, initially, I do believe that the commissioner, in his initial response, was more in agreement with canceling the season altogether. And it's unfortunate. You never want to see something like that happen. But out of the blue, they came up with this concept of the NBA bubble. And the NBA bubble would take place during the summer months, beginning in late June of 2020. Now, this is some 3 months removed from when the season was initially suspended, right? If you remember, a lot of NBA players, I could easily say most NBA players were very concerned about continuing the season, or restarting the season, I should say, restarting the season when they had a 3-4 month layoff. Now, my concern about resuming the season the way it happened, now remember, this was right in the heart of all the civil unrest that was taking place due to incidents with police violating, abusing civilians in the worst way. So you had a pandemic and all this civil unrest that was taking place. And the climate that was occurring in the country, sports became an afterthought. So at that moment, you're thinking, why had this bubble for? But for whatever reason, now I knew they wanted to recoup revenue lost by suspending the season that March. But in reality, when you're talking about something as, I don't want to use the word unique, but unconventional as the bubble, at best, would you say you broke even in terms of revenue? Well, some people say yes, some people say no. When you go back and look at the bubble in terms of the ratings that would steadily decline month after month after month, by the time the finals took place in the bubble on a per game basis, the finals was only drawing 5 to 6 million viewers. You know what I mean? But when I look back on it, my concern about having players compete, well, first of all, the bubble was initially billed as a tournament because remember, they had a seeding round before they had a playoff. Doesn't that sound like college basketball? Where they have conference tournaments to determine what your seed is going to be. That's if you are elected to participate in the Final Four tournament. Now, my concern about the bubble, not necessarily because of the COVID, or the civil unrest, but when it comes to the sport itself, let me draw it out for you. You have professional basketball players that normally use the summer months during the off season to recoup from the season that they just completed to get ready for the next season. And normally that off season starts from the end of June up until mid-September. So we're talking approximately 3 months before they start preparation for the next season. Well, when the bubble was scheduled and took place, the number one concern that people should have had was player injury. That was my top concern, player injury. We had players during the first week of the bubble who suffered catastrophic injuries, knee injuries, ACL injuries. Jonathan Isaac, if I'm not mistaken, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. Jonathan Isaac, to this day, he hasn't fully recovered from that ACL he suffered while playing in that bubble. Then the carryover effect, the bubble ended around the end of October. Remember the off season that they had? They barely had a month. Because during that off season, they condensed the draft, free agency, and trades. And all that off-season activity took place during a 2-week span. Then you had to start preparing for the next season, which they agreed to a truncated 72-game schedule where the season would start in December. So to try to adjust back to the natural NBA timeline, they had to condense that schedule to where teams had to play 4 games in 5 nights. But the kicker is, because of the condensed off season, well, teams really only had a week of training camp to prepare and had, on average, 2 to 3 preseason games. So when you take all that into consideration, well, you knew that players were going to enter that next season not in full or customary NBA shape. So you know players were going to start dropping like flies when the season started, and we saw a myriad of injuries that we never seen at the rate that we saw it during that season, where we're talking prime players suffered debilitating injuries galore. Then we had players such as Jamal Murray who suffered that ACL injury that really took him 2 seasons to recover from. And I believe those injuries occurred mainly because of the timeline that was a byproduct of holding and conducting that bubble. That's why, me personally, I believe that to protect the players, then you had multiple players who were placed under the COVID protocol anyway. So everything was just discombobulated, and I get it. You're dealing with a pandemic that is so rare that that's something that we're not accustomed to having to face on encounter on a day-to-day basis. I get that part, but in response to it, the previous season when the COVID started should have been canceled. Maintain your timeline, and then you can still stage the 82 game season, and then you can adjust properly to the COVID, the threat of COVID, and as a result, I don't think we would have saw as many players suffer the injuries. I don't think we would have seen so many players being placed under protocol the way they were during that year. So that's just my take on it, man. I can really expound on it, beyond that point. But just in general, I believe that the bubble was a miscalculation. I do not believe it was the right choice as a basketball fan, along with what was going on socially in this country. And most basketball fans was distracted. I'll put it this way. Their priority was geared towards the appropriate concerns. So that's just my take on it, man. I know that my opinion may be beyond the norm, but when you, in the grand scheme of things, I don't believe that the bubble was the best idea. I get they were trying to, come up with some sort of recourse for what had happened, and them having to suspend the season the way they did back in March of that year. But at the end of the day, sometimes the best choice is not to make the choice that you think that you want. But then when you look back on it, it caused more problems than solutions. So that's just my take on it, man. The NBA bubble, I believe in a lot of ways when it comes to the competition in the sport, it carries a stigma because a lot of fans out there don't hold or credit the championship of the bubble the way they do the standard NBA playoff situation. So that's just my take on it. Again, this is JB for Behind the Bench. You can leave your thoughts, comments. But I just wanted to drop that real quick. And I'll be talking some more NBA down the line. Again, this is JB for Behind the Bench. Until next time, holla later.